Okay, so that's not too bad as the first step towards getting lighting done for this scene. But one thing we have to think about now is that what we see here in the perspective view or the normal view of Maya is really just a preview. It's an approximation of what the lighting is like. To get a much more accurate representation as we go in regards to the lighting, what we need to do is render the view that we're looking at. So what rendering is basically a snapshot. A picture is taken of the scene, so to speak, and what we see is an accurate representation of what is happening. So to render this view, what we need to do is look at these three little symbols, or icons up the top here, little boards, little clapper boards. And the first one is the render the current frame button. So if I click on that, what happens is this picture is taken, or what you call a render is produced of the scene as we're going. So to compare the two, you can see that it's pretty close, but you'll find that as we get more detailed with our lighting, materials, and ultimately textures, then there'll be a discrepancy between the two. This render view is going to be the more accurate one. So even though the preview is useful as you're going, it's the render view that is basically the benchmark of where we are at a particular point in time. Okay, so what we'll do now is leave the ambient lighting with those two directional lights and start focusing in on another area. So if I just take a quick render, see where I'm at. Okay, so maybe what I'll do for the time being is start focusing on that central area. So what I'm going to use is a spotlight, lift it up. Now a spotlight works in a particular way. As you would expect, it's quite similar to spotlights used in film, for example, or theatre. So you can see as I'm moving or rotating the spotlight around the given area, you notice that the illumination that we see here gives you a sense of where the light is falling on, but not until you render do you see exactly what that light is doing. So I'll just take a quick render and you can see what is happening there. So clearly the patch of light is falling on the area of the stage that we want, but the default settings of the spotlight creates more of a hard-edged illumination with a sharp distinction between the lit area and the surrounding darkness. Now this may be what you want, but in this case we need to make some adjustments so the patch of light has a softer transition between light and dark, very much like this from our earlier example. So to make these adjustments, we need to take a look at the spotlight's attributes. Okay, so I'll close this render view and go to Window, Attribute Editor. If we scroll down, we notice this thing called a penumbra angle. Now the default setting is 0, and basically what that is the penumbra of a shadow is the outer edge of the shadow where it actually starts to soften. By default, this penumbra angle is 0, and you can see the little preview here next to this light shape. So that gives you an indication of what our spotlight by default looks like, which is very much the same to the render that we saw beforehand. Now if I adjust that penumbra angle, either in the negative or the positive, either way you see that that little preview here, the patch of light, is starting to blur or soften. Okay, so if I just play around with it a bit and just do it, say, here, and if I render again, we can see that that patch of light has indeed softened.